Welcome to episode 15 of CyberBytes the podcast. I'm your host, Joseph Cooper, co-founder of Aspiron Search. This week's guest, we have CEO and co-founder of runZero, Chris Kirsch. Chris tells us his secrets to building a great security team culture within his business and shares some of the do's and don'ts of rebranding. How are you, mate?
I'm doing fine. Thank you very much for having me.
Good. I saw you was, is it NateCon last week? What exactly is that?
NOLAcon, yeah.
Yeah. What is that?
For New Orleans, Louisiana, NOLA.
Okay.
So it's a cybersecurity conference. On the smaller side, it's more of a crowd, a little bit like DEF CON, but more regionalized and so on. Good conference, like good people,
Good.
good conversations. Yeah.
Slightly different to RSA a few weeks back.
Very different to RSA. Yeah, RSA is a giant show, and it's mostly vendors. I find, and it's very corporate. And NOLAcon is the opposite end of the spectrum. It's very grassroots organized by people and so on. The speaker dinner was actually at the organizer's private residence, and they home
Wow.
cooked. They didn't even cater in. So it's a much more personal feel. You would never get that at RSA.
Unreal. Yeah, great. So I know
Yeah.
you actually at RSA you ended up like hiring sort of a caf restaurant, right?
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we rented out a cafe close to the conference. We didn't want to be stuck on the conference floor. It's very hard to stand out there, and it is very expensive for what you get. And so, by renting out a cafe, we had a small stage. We had a place for meetings. We had place for for little events where we interviewed. Like one person we interviewed was Chris Nickerson. He is one of the founders of B-Sides and created the P-test penetration testing standard.
Nice.
And then he was really fun. He's always a good person to talk to. And then we had Roger Rostat from Fortinet. He's one of our customers, and he talked about asset inventory and how he takes care of that at Fortinet.
Amazing. Cool. Well, before we dive into some pretty good topics today, keen to just run back through your career to date, how you've managed to become CEO of runZero. We try and do it as quick as possible.
Yeah.
But look, really keen to learn how you've got to where you are, and then we can talk a bit more.
Sure. So I didn't really plan to end up here, so I'm not sure how much I can give in terms of advice. I've been in cybersecurity for over 25 years. Started out back in Germany. I was number three in a company that was a software company, security software company, spun out from a consulting company, and we created a product for email encryption. So using the PGP standard and SMIME standards and some other things, sold mostly to German and European customers. And then a few years later, we got acquired by PGP Corporation in the US. And that's one of the reasons why I moved over. And then worked for a few different companies, moved on to Rapid7. That's where I met my current co-founder. He's HD Moore. He's the creator of Metasploit.
Yep.
And we worked on Metasploit for a little while. And, even at that time, we learned that one of the basic problems that a lot of companies haven't solved, and companies of all sizes, is to know what they have on their network. They all have like some networking diagram that's outdated and like from 5 years ago, and since then the world's changed and etc.
Mm-hmm.
And they keep finding devices that are not in the diagram and that they didn't know about, and sometimes these devices are compromised, and this is how they find out, and that's not a good way to go about it. So my co-founder started a company and started creating the product. Used to be called Rumble. It's now called runZero. And basically he's a really good technologist. He's a subject matter expert, knows the space really well, and created a product and created product market fit, which is really important, before then scaling the company. So I had moved on to Veracode at the time, was building the product marketing team. And after the third acquisition, I got tired of Veracode and just wanted something different. And I texted HD, and he said, "Hey, why don't you come over here and help me build runZero?" And that's how I ended up there.
Nice. Did it take much convincing for you to jump ship or?
Well, I had kind of made the decision to move on, and I was
Mm,
going to take 6 months off. So he didn't have to convince me to leave. He did have to convince me to join. And I looked at the product, and I know he builds really good tech.
mm,
When a technologist builds tech, I'm always a little bit cautious to see if it's cool tech that's looking for a market or if there's actually a market there, right? And he'd already gotten, I think it was 90 customers by the time that we were talking, and just under 1 million in ARR by himself as a part-time job, by the way, because he was still working as a pen tester for another company.
mm.
And so I saw that and I thought like, wow, that's amazing. And he had some, it was not only like small shops, there was also some blue chip companies and some sizable deals and so on. So I thought if we add sales and marketing on top of that, we can really grow this into a sizable company. And it kind of showed me like early market validation that there's something there.
Great. I've seen you're pretty vocal about the customers that you do have on board as well on your
Hmm.
website and
Yeah,
some of the success that you have had. So
yeah.
how big is a company around zero now from a headcount
Uh,
perspective?
yeah, so we're just over 80 people.
Okay.
Yeah, just over 80 people right now.
And is that all US or is that global?
That is all US. Yeah, we wanted to make our lives easier from a payroll and legal and compliance perspective by just hiring in the US.
Yeah.
And we also have some government customers, so it makes it easier for that part as well. And we did choose to be 100% remote. HD is in Austin, Texas, and I'm in Boston, Massachusetts.
Mhm.
So we weren't in the same town to begin with. And I've worked remotely with HD before at Rapid7. Well, we were both in like associated with an office. He was rarely there. I was often in the Boston office, but the
Yeah.
relationship between the two of us was remote. And so HD said like, "Hey, I think I can run engineering remotely. What do you want to do with sales and marketing? Do you think you need an office, and do you want to build one in Boston?" And I thought about it for a moment, and we decided not to go for it. And that had a few reasons. First of all, it was during COVID. So renting an office during that time was not a good idea anyway. Secondly, I kind of sensed from some people hated working from home, but other people really liked it. And I also saw the first signs of companies saying like, "Oh, like we're gonna all ask you to come back to the office when this whole thing ends." And I saw a lot of people cringe and like, say like, "Oh, do I have to?" And all right, hope it's not 5 days a week and all of that stuff. So I could see some people pulling back from that and preferring a remote experience. Then also, I find that getting together in person is great, minus the things, commuting and the cost for the office, etc. But hybrid, I think, is actually worse than remote or in person. Because if you've ever been a remote person, dialing into a conference room where other people are having a conversation, it's a really bad experience. You can't hear people well, you can't see the whiteboard, side conversations. It's just really hard to follow. And so a fully remote environment actually provides the best kind of experience for everybody if some of them are going to be remote. And if you have two founders in different cities, one of them is always going to be remote, right? Unless you want to really, pay a lot of money to United and fly people around the globe.
Yeah, yeah. No,
And,
completely,
right.
completely.
And then also from a hiring perspective, if you have an office in a certain city, you are limited to the talent pool in that city.
Yep.
So it makes it a lot harder to find somebody who's a good fit for your company and where the timing's right, etc. We can look nationwide, so that makes it easier. So overall, we opted for a remote experience, and it's really worked for us so far.
Yeah, love that. Love that. There's lots of nuances we could talk about remote,
Mhm.
hybrid, and all that sort of stuff, but let's not go into all of that. That's Really keen to understand though how you built a culture as a remote first business. And I saw your values on your website
Mhm.
are pretty, yeah, they're great. And I just wondered, how are you actually it's like cementing that within the culture of your current firm?
Yeah, yeah. So the cultural values for those that are not on our website right now and are just listening in. So there are a few things, 5 things. It's being kind and fair, being transparent, focusing on customers, making sound decisions, and then fostering mindful growth. So basically, taking feedback and those kind of things. So those are 5 values that we came up with, not by, with the founders sitting in a room and drafting them up or copying from another website, but we brought 5 people from the company together, different seniorities, backgrounds, departments, and so on. And we asked them about like why they joined runZero, what they appreciate about the culture, etc. So we came up with these values from the starting point of interviewing our existing employees. And we did that at about 15 employees because we knew we would get a culture. We might just not get the culture we want if we don't write it down and start, living that culture. And so I don't think any of these values have anything to do with being remote per se. I think those values would work just as well in a physical office culture. We reinforce these in a few different ways. So, for example, we have a peer recognition system called Bonusly. It's a company, you can look it up, bonus.ly, I think. And essentially, everybody gets a budget of points each month. They can give points to other people to say thank you for things they did. And one of the things we do is we add hashtags with the cultural values to the end of that. So you can pick from the cultural values and kind of say like why you're giving those points to somebody, like what cultural value this relates to. And that helps remind people and reinforce that value. Another thing we do is we look for these kind of values in the interviews when we interview people. And now it's very hard to say like, hey, are you transparent or are you kind and fair or do you make sound decisions, right? You can't really ask that. But you can say like, hey, tell me about a time, when you had to make a hard decision. How did you go about that? And you listen, for example, if they're making a decision from the gut, if they're being data driven, you can ask people, let's say, I'm hiring a sales manager and I'm saying like, hey, was there ever a time where most salespeople was there ever a time where like, your forecast wasn't on target, right? How did you handle that? And then listen to, were they transparent about that? How did they communicate that across the organizations and how did they solve for that? Mm-hmm. Or you ask people, did you ever have an employee who didn't perform well? How did you handle that situation, right? And so you can listen for things like, did they treat that employee kind and fair when they had those conversations, right?
Yep, got it. How are you driving transparency from the top and the founders? Because I spoke to Rob Lee a couple of weeks ago, and he came on the podcast, and he said he hosts a Ask Me Anything every month. He has an hour where anyone in the company can ask him literally anything. Yeah. And I thought that was really a great initiative and idea, and we've actually rolled it out into Aspiron as well.
Yeah.
How are you guys? Like, what are you doing?
We have, for example, a town hall every month that's 90 minutes. And so we provide a lot of updates to the team on what's going on in the company. And we try to be very transparent about that. So down to the financial metrics and those kind of things, so that, things that you usually wouldn't see in another company. And we then also allow people to ask questions at the end. So it's not an exclusive AMA like Rob's doing, but it's a town hall where we first inform and then people ask questions based on that or, based on any other thing. And we recently also changed it so that it's not a question that you ask over Zoom chat, but that you ask over like an anonymous Google form, so that people feel more empowered to ask questions without,
Yeah.
ask honest questions, right? When we were a small company, it was a little bit easier. And now that we're over 80 people, I think some people are reluctant to speak up in a large group. So by making them anonymous, I think it's a little bit easier for them to ask tough questions.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, great. It's like an anonymous box that they can ask a question.
Yeah,
That's a really interesting one.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah, nice.
Exactly. Yeah.
What about when you went through like the rebrand from Rumble to runZero?
Hmm.
Did you like get the current like team involved in that? Did you like give them an idea? We're looking to do this. Can we
Yeah.
get some
Yeah.
ideas, or was that just
Yeah.
sort of put on them?
Yeah, so there's actually the whole story is probably a little bit too long for this podcast, but I do have a four-part blog post on the website where I walk people like, so if you're rebranding, I recommend you read it. If not, then it's probably a little bit too much. Where I walk people through the whole process.
Mm,
It's it basically we had it wasn't a legal branding conflict with another company, but there was another company that was becoming more and more well known, and so there was room for confusion and so on. So we decided, hey, we would rather sidestep and find a different name. And so we started out on a journey, and what I've experienced, I've done a lot of like especially product naming projects, some company naming projects, and rebranding branding projects. It's usually best to keep it to a small group until you have the final name, because otherwise people get hooked like, it's very disruptive to the whole organization. Then people like discuss all the potential names and start, maybe like if you're going down a route like we had, I think 5 times or something like that, where we almost had the right candidate, and pulled it at the last minute for some reason or other. And so if we had communicated that early, then engineers might have started putting that name into the product, or, like trying to get ahead of things and so on. And that's just super disruptive. So we decided to keep it to a smaller group. I think it was about 5 people, founder, co-founder, a few people from marketing, head of sales. And you try to find the name first. What is really important, I think, is that you get the right domain. Finding a domain that is available on .com is super hard. It's getting harder and harder, because even when people stop using a certain name, like we had rumble.run,
mhm.
we still have that domain. We're not going to give that up, because we still have SaaS platforms that we've signed up for, and emails that are coming in under that email address. So we can't give up the old domain. There's some companies, I wanted to buy some domains from companies that had been around for a while, and they had like 1,600 domains registered under their DNS server, right? So getting the domain is really important. I would have, there are differing opinions. Some people say like you don't have to get the .com. We had gotten burnt because rumble.com was the site that caused a headache for us.
Yep.
And we had rumble.run, and that caused us to rebrand. So we absolutely, definitely wanted to get a .com. And once we found runZero, we registered like, all the common top level domains as well, in different variations and so on, just to make sure that we're clean and safe for the future.
Amazing. That's a really
Yeah.
interesting
Yeah.
lesson learned. Yeah, there was a lot.
Yeah.
I'll put the link to that blog in the show
Thank you.
notes
Yeah.
for sure. Great. Well, look, really just keen. One final thing was to ask is, where did your passion for social engineering come into this? Because I saw that you won a black badge at DEF CON. What year was
Yeah.
that?
That was DEF CON 25. God, that was 6 years ago or so. I think
Seven.
this,
Yeah.
6, 7 years, something like that. Yeah. And so basically, I'd gone to like I first time I went to DEF CON, uh, I have a marketing background, so I
Mhm.
got sent to a lot of trade shows, but usually the boring ones, right? The ones where you stand at a booth and you talk to people and you do like customer conversations and vendor alliances and all of that stuff. And DEF CON, to me, the first DEF CON that I went to was really good fun, because there's no vendor booths, there's no name badges. You just go there to chat to other people and to learn. And one of the villages that I really enjoyed. So DEF CON has this concept of villages, just to
Mhm.
explain it to folks not familiar with it, that are almost like sub conferences in the same space. There's, I think, 20 or 30 of them. at DEF CON. And it's anything from lockpicking to hacking airplanes and voting machines to all sorts of other stuff. So like, basically, think of it as a focus area within security that you want to discuss. And I really liked the social engineering village because what they did there is they had contestants up on stage in a soundproof booth in front of about 500 to 1,000 people that were calling companies that they'd been assigned. They had a list of 30 different pieces of information that they had to extract from the other side over the phone. And they had a 20-minute window. And so that was really interesting, really good fun. You have one contestant at a time and the whole audience listens in. And so I came home and I told my husband about that. And he's like, I think you'd be good at that. And I thought like, really? There was also, I'm reasonably technical for a marketer, but I'm not so technical that I could go and participate in the CTF or the Wi-Fi hacking village or something like that. That would be like a steep learning curve. Mm-hmm. So I thought social engineering, if I think about that, I've been working in marketing, in sales, those kind of things. There's a lot of social engineering practices that are adopted by those disciplines as well. And I thought that even though it's a very methodology, even though there's a lot of methodology behind social engineering, it's less technical. Mm-hmm. There is a technical aspect, which is the preparation, which is all of the OSINT research, like all of the open source research that you're doing on the target. That can get very technical, but the actual conversations over the phone, you just have to figure out what's your attack vector, your pretext, like how do you want the information flow to be? How do you chain together the different things that you're asking about? And so that was more achievable for me. I did it 2 years. First year, I did really well in the report, but I got 0 connects and I didn't get any points on the call. It was, I had a firewall company as a target. And it was a Saturday afternoon where I was calling them. And it was just really hard to get people on the phone. And then next year, I had a toy company. And I found some stores that were open. They had retail channels, like third-party channels, but they also had some of their own branded stores that were part of the organization. So I targeted the stores and I was able to get in there. So that was a ton of fun. Yeah. And then the good thing is once you win, you're not allowed to go back and compete again. So
I did hear that. Yeah.
which is good for me because then I can say like, oh, I would totally come back and crush it again, but I can't.
Yeah.
Right. No, it's I actually think it's a good thing because otherwise these contests can get very incestuous, right? Where the same people go up on stage every year. And this way you make room for fresh blood and new
100%. Yeah. Well, who knows? Maybe next year I'll give it a go.
Absolutely, yeah. Apply. I think the application window is June 1st for this year.
It was my favorite village as well. I did enjoy Aerospace Village, but that was, and Car Hacking Village was good actually. But it was incredible watching them call up and get information out of these people, and everyone in the crowd's crying in laughter. Great. But look, what's next for runZero? What's next?
So, when you think about asset inventory, it's the foundation for security programs to make good decisions, right? You can only start building a security program if you know what you have. And when I see a lot of solutions out there, they aim to do something else higher up in the stack, and they know that they can't do it without asset inventory, but the company doesn't have good asset inventory, so they somehow do it, but they don't do a very good job at it. So I think there is room for a product out there that has really solid asset inventory, and then based on that solid foundation helps people make solid security decisions, right? So basically, now that we have the asset inventory from IT to OT to cloud and remote, and now we can help people make better decisions based on that data.
Yeah, great. Chris, thanks for coming on, brother. It's been great to speak.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.